Hey, welcome! Today we're jumping into a really foundational and honestly often misunderstood piece of Catholic theology, the relationship between ancient Israel and the Church. So let's get right into it.
So this is the question, right? This is at the heart of the whole thing. For literally centuries, people have wrestled with this idea. Did the rise of Christianity just mean the end of God's covenant with the Jewish people? It's a massive question, and you know what? The official Catholic answer might actually surprise you. All right, let's start with a big misconception. It's often called replacement theology, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The idea that the church just totally substituted itself for Israel and that the Jewish people were kind of pushed out of the picture, rejected. But here is the most important thing to get right away. The Catholic Church officially, and I mean forcefully, rejects this idea.
So if it's not replacement, what is it? Well, the Church teaches a theology of fulfillment. Think of it this way. It's not about abolishing something. It's about completing it. It's not about one people being substituted for another. It's about one family expanding to include the whole world. The story doesn't start over from scratch. No, it actually reaches its climax.
And look, this isn't just some new modern take. The official catechism of the Catholic Church could not be more clear on this. It says the Old Covenant has never been revoked. Never. That means God's promises are permanent. They don't have an expiration date. The foundation that was laid with Israel is the very same foundation the Church is built on.
Okay, so where's the proof for this whole fulfillment idea? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is in the structure of the kingdom itself. Catholic theology sees the Church as the direct, living continuation of the ancient kingdom of David.
Just take a look at how specific jobs in the kingdom weren't erased but were actually elevated. In the Davidic kingdom, you had a prime minister, a chief steward who kind of ran the show for the king. You also had a queen mother, the Gebira, who was this really powerful advocate for the people. While Catholic theology sees those exact offices as being fulfilled in the Papacy and in the special role of Mary.
Let's zero in on the Papacy for a second. If you look in the book of Isaiah, the prime minister is given the keys of the kingdom. That was his badge of office, his sign of authority. So fast forward to the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus gives those exact same keys to Peter, well, he's making a very direct connection. He's basically installing Peter into a job that already existed, an office that was always meant to have successors.
But this continuity isn't just about government structure. You can see it deep in worship and scripture too. And to really get our heads around this, St. Paul gives us this absolutely brilliant analogy.
He compares God's covenant family to an olive tree. The root, he says, is holy. That's the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The natural branches growing from that root, that's the people of Israel. He says, yeah, some branches were broken off because of unbelief. But then, wild branches, that's the Gentiles, non-Jews, were grafted right in. But notice the key thing here. They all become part of the same tree, drawing life and nourishment from the same holy root.
And this next part is what just completely blows replacement theology out of the water. Paul insists that those natural branches, the Jewish people, haven't been cast off for good. Not at all. He says God absolutely has the power to graft them back in. So the point is, bringing the Gentiles in was never, ever meant to be about permanently excluding the Jewish people.
You see this theme of fulfillment in worship too. Let's take Passover. In Judaism, it's this incredible memorial of being freed from slavery, but it also points toward a future promise. In Christianity, the Eucharist is seen as that very Passover finding its ultimate meaning, its completion, its fulfillment in the sacrifice of Christ, you see? It's the same story, just reaching its ultimate peak.
And these connections are literally everywhere you look. The very structure of the Catholic Mass, with its readings from Scripture and praying the Psalms, that comes directly from Jewish synagogue prayer. Eucharistic prayers sound a lot like ancient Jewish blessings. Even the manna, the bread from heaven that fed the Israelites in the desert, is seen as a prefiguring of the Eucharist. It's all one beautiful, continuous story.
Okay, so why does any of this ancient theology matter right now, today? Well, because it directly shapes how the Church understands its relationship with the Jewish people in the 21st century.
You'll sometimes hear the Church call itself the New Israel, but we have to be really careful here. This doesn't mean a new replacement race. No, it means an expanded family, a family made up of both Jews and Gentiles. And, so importantly, it was built on the foundation of the first Jewish converts, people like Mary, the 12 apostles, and the thousands who were baptized at Pentecost. They are the original, faithful remnant.
This verse from St. Paul, this is the absolute cornerstone of the Church's modern teaching, irrevocable. Just think about that word.
It means God does not take back his promises. He doesn't take back his call to the Jewish people. Period. End of story. It's a permanent, enduring relationship.
And this theology has profound, real-world consequences. It's why the Church condemns anti-Semitism in all its ugly forms as a sin. It's why it officially recognizes the Jewish people as our elder brothers in the faith. And it's why it affirms, like we saw, that God's covenants with them are still valid. All of this was formally locked into place in the landmark document Nostra Aetate during the Second Vatican Council.
And this all leads to a conclusion that is, well, it's pretty stunning. The Catechism teaches that the ultimate destinies of the Church and the Jewish people are deeply intertwined. Get this. It says that Christ's final return is actually held in suspense until the full inclusion of all Israel. It suggests that the story of history isn't over until the entire family is finally and fully reunited.
So let's end with this question. If we really shift our perspective from replacement to fulfillment, how does that change the way we see the world, the way we see each other right now? It transforms history from a story of division and substitution to a story of growth, of expansion, and of an enduring, unbreakable family bond. It's a perspective that finds continuity where other people might only see conflict. Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.